To thank God above. God above. 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 Gangsters, cops, and politicians, get ready to rock on a mission. Each one of us shares our own vision. When I was on the yard, I went real hard. But I patrolled the streets, all the T's I meet. When I was on the yard, I went real hard. But I patrolled the streets, all the T's I meet. Well, got to stay woke. I like to thank God above. I like to thank God above. God above. I like to thank God above. God above. I like to thank God above. God above.
Saludos, it's your host, Gabe Morales, coming back again for another informative episode, this time on prison gangs and prison politics in regards to so-called dropout gangs. So let's get into the subject of dropout gangs or DOs. I've heard a lot of individuals over the years say that they can't be a dropout because they never dropped in or joined a prison gang. And that is true. A lot of the guys that are in these organizations were only associates and did not like the way these prison gangs were operating. A few of them were actually members, but I would say most are what could be classified as prison gang associates. Now, for those of you who don't understand the California prison system, you have different levels, facilities. Level 1 is camp. There are usually no major hitters there, but you can have some gang members. For instance, there are quite a bit of Surenos who have low points. Level 2 could have some major hitters. In fact, some major prison gang murders have gone down at level 2 facilities. You could have some sleepers or individuals who slip by the classification process and have some points, but not high enough to be classified into level 3 or level 4 institutions. At level 3, now you're moving up in points. And this is where many DOs are housed today. You also have level 4 main lines. New Folsom, where I worked for 6 years, was a level 4 institution. And let me tell you, it is rocking and rolling. Level 4s have prison gang members as well as a lot of associates, and they have for decades. These institutions may also have security housing units attached. And all of these prisons have ad-seg areas or isolation, where individuals are housed after major incidents and after their 115 hearings may have their points raised and transferred to another institution. By the year 2000, protected custody or PC yards and DO yards were growing fast, to the point where today I'd say close to 75% of inmates housed in the California Department of Corrections are either on sensitive need yards or on what they call non-designated yards, meaning that the big four, the Mexican Mafia and West Familia, Aryan Brotherhood, and Black Guerrilla family, are not supposed to be on those yards. Today, there are probably about 24 so-called dropout gangs on sensitive need yards with thousands of offenders, whereas I would say there's less than 1,000 validated big four prison gang members in all of California. Now, there's some differences from general population or GP yards and sensitive need yards. In general population yards, you have to get permission from the big homie, from the key holders, the guy who has the llaves, or at least your building rep, to get permission to do almost anything against another gang member. This is so you don't kick off a prison gang war. So most of the time they hold court and discussions are undertaken before something kicks off. Most of the time, if the prison gang member is in error, they'll do internal discipline on him and check him. This could be a beating or by a stabbing. But in sensitive need yards, there is no such rules. Anybody can get down without permission. And in many of the DO gangs, there is no leader or leaders. Now, you have certain facilities that always have a reputation for being soft yards or PC yards. The California Men's Colony at San Luis Obispo was known as a PC facility way back in the 1960s and 70s. You also have facilities like Mule Creek, which is located not far from Folsom. That was a level 3 yard and had a lot of PC individuals in it. These type of facilities end up evolving into what they call sensitive need yards, or SNYs. Now, the Aryan Brotherhood has had several groups that attempt to break off because they were dissatisfied with the commission. You had the host of Valhalla. This was led by Steve Kessler, who was later rehoused in Oregon Department of Corrections. But he had a very close relationship to the Manson family. And yes, many of the Manson girls tried to start an Aryan sisterhood. And in spite of some California gang task force saying there ever was such a thing, I have some letters showing that. I also had some guys on my yard that would call themselves the Brand Busters. This was a movement to go against the Aryan Brotherhood that was made up of former Aryan Brotherhood members and associates. Later on, the Nazi lowriders formed the Fuck the Brand, or FTB faction. This is a big reason why the Aryan Brotherhood chose to disassociate itself from many of the NLRs, and they put a green light on the FTBs. And when you think about it, the Nuestra Familia actually was born out of the Mexican Mafia, or an anti-Mexican Mafia group. In fact, some of the early Nuestra Familia members were considered for Mexican Mafia membership. This organization, the Nuestra Familia Mexicana, operated undercover from 1965 to 1968 when Robot Salas got involved in the incident where he stole a pair of shoes from Hector Mud Dog Padilla of San Jose. This was basically the coming out party of the Nuestra Familia Mexicana, later changed to just NF when Babo Sosa took over because he was Puerto Rican. Then you also had the Familia Cinco. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that Familia Cinco was the predecessor of the Nuestra Familia. This is not true. And if you look in my book, you'll see documentation of why this is not the case. In fact, I have a letter in my prison gang book dated in 1974 from the head of the Familia Cinco, David Pajarito Corona, complaining about how some of the Familia Cinco members jumped over to the Mexican Mafia. And some of them also left to the Nuestra Familia side. So if the Nuestra Familia started in 1965, how could Familia Cinco been its predecessor and still be active in 1974? Then you had the Fresno Bulldogs, which split off from the Nuestra Familia. I'm going to do a separate video on them, so I'm not going to really get into details right now. But guess what? I had some of the founders of that group on my yard at New Folsom, and I talked to them, read their C files, and kept tabs on them ever since the 1980s. Then you have New Flowers. In my opinion, there was a group called the Hermits that were much like the New Flowers, but it were basically dropouts from Nuestra Familia back in the 1970s. So I think the New Flowers have been around a lot longer than people realize. Now, I know some individuals that are New Flowers that actually were Nuestra Familia members, but like I said, a lot of them were just associates who did not like the way the NF was operating. They felt that they were oppressing people no different than the Mexican Mafia did to Northerners and non-Mexican Mafia inmates, which was the reason why the NF supposedly started as a protection group. Now, just because they're New Flowers and so-called DOs doesn't mean they stop their life of crime. They just cannot function on the same yards as Nuestra Familia and have been deemed no good by the NF organization. I have heard that New Flowers can program with bulldogs on yards like Sea Yard at Pleasant Valley. This is a facility that's well known for prison gang violence. Let me know if that is still the case. And then you have the Northern Riders. So basically what you had was a situation where you had Northern Structure or Nuestra Raza, which was the junior farm team for the Nuestra Familia, and you had individuals who did not like the way they operated. One such individual was Maurice Snoop Vasquez, who's from Sacramento, Barrio Salsa Parque, I believe, which has nothing to do with Southsiders. It's a well-known barrio just south of downtown Sacramento that has a mural amphitheater behind it. I've been to a lot of Cinco de Mayo festivals and other festivals there. Now, the Northern Riders uses a Playboy symbol. Often it'll have a five-pointed star in its eye. The five-pointed star is used by the Nuestra Familia and Nuestra Raza. So basically it's saying that they have their eyes on them and targeting them. They may call themselves riders or players or compadres, compas. Now, even though they say they don't want any structure and don't want anybody calling the shots for them, Snoop is looked at as a god by the riders, and he wrote rules for them. In my opinion, he's a loudmouth and a narcissist, but I guess some people like him. He is known as a good fighter, so I guess he justifies talking smack because he says he can back it up. He has now been federally prosecuted, and we'll see if the Northern Riders spread into the federal BOP. But even with the Northern Riders, you have Snoop supporters, pro-Snoop faction, and you have the anti-Snoop faction. One is known as Northern Riders, and the other is known as Certified Riders. Oh, and by the way, I've seen this logo on some Northern Riders YouTube presentations. I actually designed this particular logo for a presentation I did on the Northern Riders when I was with the International Latino Gang Investigators right around 2008, when not a lot of people knew about the Northern Riders. Then you have the Zapatistas. No, this is not the same group that supported Emiliano Zapata, nor is it the group that supported Commander Marcos when they had their uprising down in Chiapas, Mexico. No, this is a prison gang. And once again, it's not accurate to call them dropouts because these guys are very active. There is not a lot of validated information on these guys. The only thing I know is it is said that they will only take in murderers and they cannot be housed on yards with the big four. My understanding is that it is their intention to build up a solid rep by killing rivals. As most of you know, I put out a lot of historical information on these gangs, but I will refuse to put out current intelligence unless I feel it is absolutely necessary, such as when the press got it wrong in saying that the Mexican Mafia killed some MS members recently, when it was actually the other way around. I was getting that passed around a lot by intelligence officers and corrections officers at facilities all across the United States. And I saw that as an officer safety issue. So I was one of the first ones put out the word on what really happened. I do understand that CDC has tried to reintegrate yards, and that includes Zapatistas and another group I'll talk about here in just a minute, the Pesetas, the 2 5s. I will only put out what the media put out about the August 11th, 2022 incident at Tehachapi. It said, quote, prison officials said 6 inmates were hurt after a riot broke out Thursday morning at California Correctional Institution at Tehachapi. A California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation spokesman told 17 News the riot broke out in one of the prison yards just after 10:30 a.m. Thursday. Officials said correctional officers used chemical agents and less lethal foam rounds to stop the riot. Several makeshift weapons were found at the scene, according to CDCR. 6 inmates were taken to outside hospitals for treatment, and no CDC staff were hurt in the riot. The incident is still under investigation, and so it still is at this current time. So outside of that, all I will say is that 2 individuals died, and at least one of the victims almost died. Like I said, not a lot is known about this group. I'll just give you a little information. There's not a lot of information about them. I don't even have them listed in my prison gang book. That's how new they are. But it said that they started in about 2013, very secretively. Supposedly, when they first came out, the 2 5s, Zapatistas, and Northern Riders all got along. But then, I understand in 2014, they killed a Peseta, and it's been on with the Pesetas ever since. And they had a few other disturbances, including another homicide. Zapatistas can include inmates from both Northern and Southern California. In fact, the founder was supposedly from Stockton, but I heard was later killed for his actions. I heard that another individual actually was from Happy Town, Pomona, and that they will sometimes call themselves Soldados de la Raza, as well as the rebels against Nuestra Familia and Mexican Mafia oppression. They have no written rules or constitution, or supposedly any leaders, but they do have a philosophy, and here's one such take. We as Zapatista rebels operate on a no-hands policy, meaning we are to hit any adversaries. It goes on to say we are the alpha dogs. We balance the scales to do what's right. Never compromise. We're soldados with heart and huevos, homie, straight up. So basically, your 2 5s, your pesetas are bigger than the Zapatistas, but the Zapatistas say they're badder. You also have the independent riders. These guys were formed in Riverside County, but can now also be found in San Bernardino County. They mostly operate in the Inland Empire. I understand these guys started about 2005, originally as a workout group out in the yard of the Robert Presley Detention Center, in the old jail, Housing Unit 19 to be exact. Independent riders can be of any race. I realize some of their logos may look like a German cross, but this actually was taken from a skateboard logo. They may also use 918. The 9 stands for I, for independent, and the 18 for R, or 18, for rider. Not only do Zapatistas now fight 2 5s or pesetas, but I understand independent riders fight 2 5s. Let me know if that's still correct. Now, a few of the pesetas are former Mexican Mafia members, but most of them are Mexican Mafia associates. I understand even Boxer Enriquez, for a while, was running the pesetas until he was told that he was messing up and jeopardizing his chances of getting out. If you don't know who Boxer Enriquez is, I have a recent video on him. Now, I feel personally the pesetas have been around a lot longer than most people realize. In fact, I think they were operating in New Folsom Prison C Yard back in the 1980s. But they're said to have become a formal organization in the 1990s. What you had at New Folsom is you had A facility, B facility, and C facility. A facility, small yard, was where the security housing unit was. The violence control unit is where I worked, A5 on the small side. And then you had the big yard, where individuals like Babo Sosa was housed for a short time period. Then you had B yard, which was Mexican Mafia associates and some active members, many of whom were not yet validated. And you had other prison gang members there as well. Then you had C yard, which both sides, when I worked there, for general population, but considered a soft yard. So you had a lot of dropouts there. And then what they would do sometimes is they would have prisoners come through, some of them who were still actives. And I know personally of several who got told on, and these individuals were moved over to B yard or even sometimes over to the SHU. It was these individuals that were former Mexican Mafia members or associates that were really the predecessors of the pesetas. Peseta, by the way, is a common term for a 25-cent coin in Mexico. An individual named Jaime Vago Vega was considered the founder of the pesetas. And he pretty much had an attitude that, hey, the Mexican Mafia is oppressing us. We need to form an organization that is anti-M, Fuerza Mexicatal in Aztec, which is Mexican force. They end up using a 5-point star. This is different than what the Northern structure used. They would use the 5-point star for the Dallas Cowboys. They also will call the organization Dos Cinco, which is 2-5 in Spanish. They may use a Mayan bar, Mayan numeral 25, not Aztec. They might even use a black hand, which you could mistake for a Mexican Mafia member, but it'll have a 2 in it, 2 with 5 fingers, 2-5. Understand that the 2-5s even have a couple different factions. One is the 2-5 Mexicas, and one is the 2-5 Malditos. They'll say things like, fuck Suratas, which is disrespect to the Surenos, who are supporters of the Mexican Mafia in California. The Mexican Mafia controls all Sureno street gangs. And so in many of the videos, you see the gang name with a 13 behind it. I have yet to see a gang name with a 2-5 behind it. But most of these 2-5s are former members of barrios. They were just in bad standings with the other Sureños and Mexican Mafia. They'll say tax-free, just as the Maravilla and Green Lighter gangs did. And they will also say puro ome maquile. I know this has been on a lot of YouTube channels, and I really was contemplating why I should even talk about this, because I don't want to sound like I'm hopping on the bandwagon. But I think it's relevant for a couple of reasons. In August 2022, police responded to a shooting outside Yucca Valley's #1 Smoking Guns tattoo shop, which is located on 29 Palms Highway, that I passed by every weekend when I was stationed on the Marine Corps base there from 1983 to 1984. On that date, a shooting victim was found, Steven Seagal, who was named after the famous martial artist Steven Seagal. He was found by police in the parking lot with several gunshot injuries. Police soon caught the suspect, who was named as Manuel Robledo, who reportedly is from Pico Rivera in the eastern part of LA County. Steven Seagal was known as Savage from Savage Studios, and he had his own YouTube channel. Savage sported many tattoos and body piercings. He had a very prominent Picoma tattoo on his neck and SFB on his chin. As I understand, he was originally from Picoma Project Boys, which is a gang located in the San Fernando Valley, just north of LA. On one of his videos, he openly challenged the Mexican Mafia and disrespecting them and basically daring them to do anything about it. He also disrespected the Sureños. The video was posted on May 2nd, 2020, and he later wisely apologized for his disrespect. It was broadcast to thousands and stated that he was intoxicated at the time he made the video. Now, while he appeared very cocky and loudmouth, I understand from several people who actually knew him that he was not that way in private. They state that he was actually pretty mellow and was a real cool vato. So I don't know if he was being just a loudmouth on his channel for YouTube hits and causing drama for more views or not, but that may have caught up to him. I know one thing, the enemy never forgets. And several people who thought that found out, sometimes even decades later. So many people have speculated that it was the Mexican Mafia who got. Others say it could have been his own gang, the 2-5s, for talking too much about that gang. I really don't know. And if I did know, I still wouldn't say. But I'll say this for you YouTubers. Think about your families, man. Don't put out anything that could put them at risk. It's not worth it. I think some of you guys, man, are putting out videos for YouTube hits. And I'm not trying to do that here in this video. I'm trying to state the truth without calling out names. It basically comes down to respect versus lack of respect. This is not a video game. When you put out stuff, you don't get to hit the reset button. Human life is too precious. So listen up, guys. Think before you start posting stuff on the internet. We should all be able to agree to disagree at times. I had another popular YouTube channel in the prison genre that I usually give kudos for his interviews, but he had put up a guy who was really just F this and F that and just really bad example for the youngsters, which was supposedly the aim of the channel, to educate people about the dangers of the gang lifestyle. And maybe I shouldn't have posted what I did. I tried to give him some positive criticism about not putting that individual on, and that he actually had an individual on right before that was very good. That was more in the lane that he professed to be pushing. I probably went too far too, and in stating I felt he threw a tantrum on the air about an event that didn't go off as planned. I apologize for that. But after I posted that, he went on another rant, basically saying that I didn't know squat and I wasn't shit and some really negative stuff. And I never meant him any harm. I don't mean anybody any harm. In fact, I even was on his channel one time. The last I checked, he got like 50,000 hits on that. So you think he'd want to hear more of my positive stories? I, for one, actually appreciate positive criticism as long as it's not personal. I'm even okay with the people who want to point out the 1% of mistakes in my videos. I'm okay. I don't get all bent out of shape. Personally, I don't depend on this YouTube stuff for my income. I get a good pension. I'm going to be getting a Social Security check. I'm 62, not 642. Enough of the petty politics. People who know me know I'm spiritual, not religious. I'm not a Bible thumper, but if you watch my show, it often starts off with, I thank God above. The Bible is a holy book. It's not the only book I've ever read or still read. And I don't just watch Christian shows. I believe the Bible has a lot of parables in it and a lot of wise passages. I'll read you one. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became a man, I did away with childish things. That comes from the book of Corinthians. With that, I hope you enjoyed this short episode on dropout gangs, and share my channel with your peers. Like I said, please keep those positive comments coming. I'm always looking to improve my channel and looking for positive guests to come on the show. Thanks for watching, and God bless. This is Gabe Morales signing off. Gangsters, cops, politicians.
God above. God above. Like to thank God above. God above.